Go ahead.
Pipelines coming in, right? And then your oxygen tanks, right? So, did you read about the most fragile part on the cylinders?
Of what? I'm sorry?
What's the most delicate part of the cylinder?
The valve.
The valve, yes. Yes. So, these are your valves, right? So the cylinder uses the pin index safety system, right? When you put this on the machine, you can't, this is oxygen, right? And this is air. You should not be able to switch these around because of the pin index safety system, right? Do you remember what the pins are for oxygen?
Is that what you're talking about?
What?
Are you talking about the two, like, elements that stick out?
2 and 5.
Yes, 2 and 5. Yes, and air
1 and 5.
and nitrous.
3 and 5.
That's right. Are you the air?
I'm Italian.
If air is first 1 and 5, O2 2 and 5, nitrous 3 and 5. You're gonna find fancy ways to remember all of this. There's gonna be so many things in your head that you have to remember, that you come up with your own things. Yes, Francine.
Can I show them?
Yes.
I'm taking notes too. I'm on your way.
Oh, also, when you guys do your evaluation, let us know what we could have changed, what we could have done better, because that's the only way the ones who comes after you will get better things from your suggestions, okay?
So, talking about the pin index safety system, there's pins in your hanger yoke, but that's where your pins go into. And the configuration will never be the
Okay.
same. Also, and always make sure that if you hear this fall, this is your washer. This is very important.
And you want to make sure there's only one of those, because if there is two, theoretically, the books say that you could override the safety system. You have to take washers.
There. That's why they don't work in touching this.
But I teach this to the techs too. So they know about the pin index safety system and when they get into the disc.
So when you store oxygen, since we're on these cylinders right now, when you store the cylinders, you always want to make sure that they're the little receptacles. Sometimes when you're done with them, because sometimes when you transfer your patients, usually you transfer your patients on oxygen, right? If they're wide awake, and you can transfer them without oxygen to the PACU. But most of the time you transfer them on oxygen, which is what the other tank in the room is for. And sometimes it's because when they come to you on the stretcher, they'll have a cylinder on the stretcher. Sometimes you forget and you leave it open and it's empty, so you use the one in there. So if it's done here at Fairfax, what we like to do is we lay it on the floor, on its side. You can do that for a short time, so the techs can know that it's empty. But normally it's in the receptacle, because if you break the valve, which is the most fragile part of this, it takes up like a projectile, right? But it will spin, yeah? So you want to be as careful with it as possible. So that's why it's always in the receptacle. And we typically have moved to these kind of cylinders because these are MRI safe. Do you remember why you don't want a metal, well, of course you do, and MRI, right? You do not want that because it's, the magnet is always on, right? So it will suck it in there. And there's a patient in there, I think there was a case at Johns Hopkins where a kid actually got, it wasn't good, because the tank took off. It wasn't an MRI compatible tank, and it took the patient in the MRI, and of course, you know, the force of this with that magnet is like 2.5 or 3 Teslas is the gauge of that. It just pulled it and the kid died, right? So these, usually if it has 2 colors, it means it's MRI safe. The ones that are just plain green or plain blue or whatever the color code for that gas is, would not be MRI safe. We have typically moved to these. You find these all over Fairfax. where it's MRI compatible. Okay? All right. So this is the back of the machine. This is basically where the high pressure system is, right? Because you have to regulate this downrange of the pressure, right? All right. And the master switch, oh, it's down here. I think that's it, right, Mercy?
Yes, that is it.
That's the master switch. Okay? Usually this is on. The machine stays on at Fairfax. Most places you don't. Unless it's some place where they don't use the machine a whole lot. Sometimes you have, I think at Stafford and maybe Washington, there are areas you go where you have to get the machine yourself. Because they're stored in the same place all the time, but it's stored in there because they don't use it. Have you been to those places? Not right? Somebody, okay, yeah. You have to move them, okay? But usually here it's plugged in and it stays plugged in, and this stays on, okay? All right. Any questions? Any other questions? Feel free to ask. There are no long questions. The long questions is the one you don't ask because they get to test you on this. I don't. So ask me.
Scavenging is not included in any of the high, medium, or low pressure systems, right? Because it's going from the
It kind of is it. It's kind of a separate system all on its own because it does its own thing, right? We'll talk about that too. Good question. I don't think it is. Is it?
I can't.
I don't think so. I think it's separate because it works independent of this. Okay? All right.
So I have a question. So the master switch versus on and off button. Like what would master switch do and what would on and off button do?
I think Francine wants that one.
Okay.
Francine should get that one.
Let me, I can even show you. All right, so your master switch, do you guys know about your gas? No?
Just
Okay.
that part.
Okay. So one of your inhalational agents is plugged in always, right?
Oh yeah. We'll go to the preferences. Don't tell them yet.
Okay.
Because then they have to tell us.
So if this master switch is off, everything except your screen will stay on. It will run on battery. But this won't come on, that won't come on, and that won't come on. Okay? And you need everything else. You need to charge, you need your vitals. And if you are a That's Ryan user, you need that.
So, one thing, whenever you turn that off, it'll tell you how much battery power you have. When it's on, you won't see that. But when you turn it off, it'll tell you. So it stays on at Fairfax. It stays on at Fairfax. So you can charge the battery the entire time at Fairfax. I think it's gonna go off. It should go off because I think I remember seeing that. It doesn't lose. Oh, so you don't see that. Remember the green battery symbol on there?
Turned on as the right. Okay.
Do these monitors have different names? Like I know that this one is the one that comes with the machine, but I think that's an add-on and that's a separate machine.
Yeah, this is separate. This you won't find at most places. This is almost unique to Fairfax. Have you seen this at other places? The set monitor?
Oh, no.
No, we'll talk about it. This is not part of your machine, but we'll talk about it. So they're gonna, it shouldn't confuse you, but it's not, pretend this is not here. It's hard to do this, it's right here. But this is not here. Okay? Huh? It is. We'll talk about it. How much time, what's the time on it right now?
Like 10:20.
Okay.
Maybe like 10 minutes.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, thank you. Okay, so now you're going to the intermediate pressure system, right? Lauren?
Okay, so what's included in that is so first of all, with this system, have you guys learned about the 5 functions of oxygen? 5,
I don't think they have. We'll go through, you get another lab with the machine, okay? And then it will make much more sense to you. Right now it's all stuff. Like, okay, yeah. You're gonna go home and be like, I don't even remember what they told me. But that's okay too.
Okay, so one of the functions of your oxygen is the O2 flush. So that's included in the intermediate system. And then the fail-safe system as well. And
You should say, what is the fail-safe system?
what's the fail-safe system?
There you go.
Do you have a good way of explaining it? I mean,
So you would expect this machine to tell you when you don't have oxygen, right? Or when your oxygen pressure is low, right? So there are different ways for it to tell you that there's something wonky going on with the oxygen. The first one is the fail-safe system, right? So that happens when the pressure in the system. So you can either monitor your oxygen level by pressure or by concentration in the machine. That's the way the machine monitors it, right? The pressure or the concentration of the oxygen, right? So the fail-safe doesn't measure the concentration at all. It just tells you that the pressure of the oxygen is low in the system, right? So when that drops below 30, I think it will alarm. And then when it drops below 20, it kind of shuts everything down, right? Because then you might give your patient a hypoxic mixture just based on the pressure in the pipe. It's not sensing that it's oxygen. It's just saying whatever that green is connected to is not giving you enough pressure.
So some machines will completely shut off your flow of nitrous and air. Some of them will proportion to like make sure it's not a hypoxic mixture.
And all of these things sound like nonsense to you right now, but it will make sense once they do the lab. Or it's not nonsense, but very strange.
Well, that part makes sense. But
Part
then
of
you
it
have to
makes
worry about
sense.
the emergence, like factor being
You want to have oxygen, right?
Yes.
Rather than
It's like,
other
you know,
gases.
hypoxia, that's actually how much writing.
Yes, Francine.
And the older machines, when we used to have the nitrous knobs, the O2 would automatically turn on with it. Is that part of the
That's
fail-safe?
separate. That's the hypoxic bar.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's separate. That's in the low pressure system because it's at the flow meters.
And you were saying that it's going to alarm when you have the low 30 psi pressure?
Yes, when it's sensing that the pressure is below that, yeah.
In the pipe.
In the
That
pipe.
will definitely
Okay.
be a question. The fail-safe.
That is not the question.
Oxygen pressure, and then they'll try to trick you with oxygen concentration.
The concentration. So then there's a different, that's the oxygen analyzer, right? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
The analyzer will tell you, will actually identify that it's oxygen.
That's your last resort.
The
That's
last
all
one.
the way to the end.
And so on some of the machines, that's the one that she was saying, it's the part of the cell that you will have to open and calibrate to atmospheric pressure. Because then when you put it back on, it should say 21% before you go forward, right? Because this is 21% oxygen, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. I was going to say something else and I forgot.
So.
It'll come today.
That's it with the intermediate.
So since the vaporizers are part, are they part of
I think they're part of the low system.
okay, we'll talk about
You
that
were
later.
going to say something about oxygen analyzer and concentration. No?
Yes. So once that drops below me and you right now.
I think it's like 20% too.
No. What are we breathing right now?
No, we're doing 21, but I.
So if it goes, for a lot of the
Maybe it's
machines,
25.
yes,
Okay.
it has to be above that because one, your patient is under anesthesia, right? You are breathing further. You have there's no. Me and you, we can control a lot of things when we're awake and with it and doing things. They cannot, right? And you don't know what metabolic processes are going on, right? So they need more oxygen. So that, when it drops below, for a lot of machines, below 25, it will alarm. And that's the alarm you can't shut off, right? There's one that you can't shut off, I can't remember, I'm sorry. But I think that's the alarm you cannot shut off. A lot of these you could hit this button and it will shut it up, right? But that one will not shut up for good reasons. Because now your patient's not getting at least 21% or whatever the manufacturer sets the analyzer alarm at, right? And you want the patient to get at least that, right? Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
So the hypoxic guard is different from the fail-safe. The hypoxic guard is what she was talking about with your flow meters. It's all electronic on this machine. But on some machines you'll have the old school flow meters with the knobs. So if you were to go and turn on your nitrous, it'll either be electronically linked or there's an actual link where it will increase your O2 flows in proportion to your nitrous flows so that you're not delivering less than 30% oxygen. So it will adjust. So that's another thing you can check on those older machines. Just turn up your nitrous and see if your oxygen goes up with it. And There is also a reason that the oxygen is the last gas to be distributed in the flow meter system. Did you guys read about that at all? So it's usually like nitrous air, oxygen. Oxygen's last because if there was say oxygen was over here and then there was a crack, then it's going to get diluted out if it's further back. So it's always going to be your last gas to be added. So those are things that could be leaks in your low pressure system, crack in your flow meters. And let's see, we talked about the O2 analyzer. Another place you can have a leak in your low pressure system is your CO2 absorber. That's a pretty common one. So we'll let you guys play around with this. That's right here.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
We'll take a break and then we'll do that because information overload, right?
Yeah.
So much stuff. But you know what? The more you touch it and play with it, the less intimidating it gets, right? So as time goes on, Lauren can talk about this now, myself, but at the start I was thinking, oh Lord, all of this and then that, and then knowing whatever they're doing with the patient and what my position is going to be and what I want to do, which usually is nonsense at that point. Like I just write stuff down and I come in and I go, throw back. Like, yeah, I know. But I had to write something down. So I wrote this down, you know. Any questions at all? No? Yes. I know, it's like I don't even know what to ask at this point. I know the feeling.
If you want to play with the machine, so this machine is very user friendly. Anything that's this color, you can use. See? And this. And this.
Yeah, we'll go through that because that is I didn't know how to do that. Do that again.
This button here, press it and pull it out. And that's when I can show you about the APL valve and the pressure that exerts when you get up the brake.
That's nice. I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Is looking at the back of the machine part of your check, or I mean, I know we're just learning about it, but is that something that you ever look at, like every single day you have to check the back and make sure it looks okay?
After
Check your
don't
cylinders as well as your, yeah.
there are places where they want you to check it. A lot of places don't, because usually it's. Do you know how to open the cylinder in the back, right? With the wrench thing.
We could do that.
We can do that.
Yeah.
We can do that. We can do that now. Because we need to decompress right now. We just talked at you a whole lot, and I know the feeling. So go ahead.
So if you need to use the bathroom, there's one right outside the hall.
And then this takes it off.
This takes it off. Yes. So do you want to take it off?
And this is good.
This is where you do this. You know, because I tell you that first day.
At the end of the case, you can hook up a thing.
Yeah, the second is just come and
Because this is like, this is going to take whatever options are low, and then you would put that to have here, and then you would I gotta change it out. Something like that. You
Yes.
would use on something.
And I've gone to places where when I check that it's empty. It's empty.
Roll gauge. That is right here.
So yeah, look at the pin, the piece in the back, the pin in that safety, and see how different it is
And then
with the other one when she takes the oxygen here. Okay. Please. Yeah, you see? It actually shocks you. It does.
So this one's more like to the left.
She said the washer fell somewhere.
And then
And there's right there.
Yeah, this is your control, and then this is.
Wait, you see next to the difference?
No, she found
This
it.
is more to the left.
Because it looks the same color. Together.
Times in the morning, you'll come in and it will be like
So try to put the oxygen on that one.
So one of your checks.
It won't go.
It shouldn't go, yeah. Yeah, this one is not. But it shouldn't go. For good reasons.
On this, it is all electronic. So it's like right here.
The washer is on that one, right?
Yeah. I have it here.
Oh, you have to put it up.
Your vent is your automatic part.
Sensing right
So
now
it-
is the pressure between.
Once it's in this, once it's here, we're
When you
focused
open
on
it, it
here
tells you what's
forward.
inside, right?
Once it's here,
And then
we're
you
focused
close
on
it,
your
right?
back.
Once you
Okay?
close it, it will
So
still
this pressure's
sense
applies the pressure, or whatever pressure that it applies to your manual circuit, it would apply. The extra, this is also called your expiratory spill valve. So the extra air, I guess, that pressure
builds up.
it will spill out of your expiratory valve into your scavenger
Depending on what you set here. Okay, so if you set it at 30, then if the pressure builds up in the system above 30, then it's going to go to the scavenger. Does that make sense? If you have it here, there is no pressure. Okay, everything's going to scavenger. So you can't ventilate because you're not pressurizing your circuit.
So
Is
for
there a
instance, you
reason
typically
these
have
tanks
between
don't
30
have like the?
So when you are manually ventilating, you don't want your peak pressures to be greater than 20.
Turns off, it doesn't tell you, right?
It doesn't.
So basically, it regulates the pressure in
Within
the
your
patient's
circuit when you're
circuit.
manually ventilating.
Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Yeah, so when you go to your first day, please don't do that. Don't take it apart.
Yes, so when you are manually ventilating a patient, you don't want your peak inspiratory pressures to be above 20. Does anyone know why? Might not. So the lower esophageal sphincter tone is 20. So if you ventilate above that, you can insufflate the stomach with oxygen. But that doesn't mean that you never want this to be above 20. Because sometimes patients can be difficult to mask. So if you're masking somebody, you want to pressurize the system so you can ventilate.
No, muscles there.
I know.
I saw them leave everything nice and.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta get on your workout plan.
So if you're ventilating, you can see our pressures are 34.
Remember, you never want to leave
So I
it
can
open,
go
right?
down
Never
a
leave it open.
little
Never leave it open.
less, but see I have a leak. So now it's less.
Yeah, because
So
if you put
basically,
pressure here,
as you're
you
ventilating
want to
someone,
know.
you're going to be adjusting
You
this
never leave
so
this
that you
open.
get enough pressure so you can exchange air,
So
but you're not
it
going
would
above
only be if like there's a
20
problem like in the line that you
because you don't want to insufflate the oxygen.
I'm sorry, I was in the bathroom. You said 20 because of the lower esophagus.
Yeah.
This is coming from the same place we get the water oxygen.
I don't want to overload you guys with too much
Yeah,
information, but basically that's the big thing with the APL is it's active only during spontaneous
Oh, I know where they go. You know where.
ventilation. When you have the bag on, the APL doesn't matter.
Like first is going MRI.
And like we mentioned, it basically helps to pressurize your circuit so that you can ventilate the patient. It's like if you're at minimum, all of it is going to go through your expiratory spill valve into your scavenging. If you're at 20, once the pressure in the system gets to 20, the extra pressure is going to go through the expiratory spill valve into the scavenging system, and so forth all the way. If it's all the way closed, then you could be giving your patient a pressure of 70, which is a lot and can cause barrier trauma.
Is there like an average that you would say you typically use, or is it just patient dependent?
So usually you want to try to keep it above 20, but it's not so much this number. Like I said, it's more so this number. You don't want it to be above 20 when you're ventilating because you don't want to insufflate air through that lower esophageal sphincter, which has a tone of 20. But if you're up at 30 and you're trying to get a good seal, but some of the oxygen's leaking around the mask, you're not going to get a pressure of 30 because you're leaking some oxygen, if that makes sense. So you're still going to have it higher because you need the extra pressure so that you can ventilate, but you're not actually giving them the full pressure. It's a foreign concept, but the basic is that it helps to pressurize your circuit.
So everyone who was in the back with me, who can come up front, and those who are in the front can go to the back.
Mask. The one thing to remember is this is going to give you whatever's in your machine. So if there's a pipeline crossover or something like that, where your machine's doesn't have oxygen but it's sensing oxygen, then it's going to deliver that. Or if you have a loss of oxygen, you want to use a tank. You don't want to use that. Suction control gauge is this right here. So right now it's off. There's a little circle. This is going to be max, and this is intermittent.
really want.
Does the gauge above it do like the strength?
You come and take it.
In my experience, it really doesn't. It's kind of just set there and it is.
Okay.
But theoretically, you can adjust it.
It's not the first one.
Okay.
To not flare. A lot of times in the morning, your machine will kind of be just like that so that you're not hearing the suction all the time. So one of your checks is going to be to make sure that you have enough suction to clear the airway. And you'll have a gain guard connected as well. Okay. And I never turn this off unless I have like an OG that's connected or all right, so that's your suction canister, your tubing, and then you'll have a gain guard as well. Flow meter control valves on this machine are electronic. On some machines, they're going to be the switch knobs. One thing about the oxygen actual hand-on turn knob is it's fluted and it's like different shape. That's a safety mechanism so that if you're like, you know, emergently going, you can feel the difference and just turn the oxygen. With this machine, it's all electronic. So these are your flow meter control valves. So right now, we're giving 100% oxygen at a flow of 6 liters per minute.
Learn the calculation.
If you want to change the percentage of oxygen, you can either touch it and toggle with
So you
this,
know what's the volume in the tank is,
or you
right?
can just
You know what the volume in the tank
hit
is, and
whatever
then
you
you know
want.
how many liters come in.
Typically, in a case, I'll juice between 50 to 60% oxygen.
That makes sense.
And then over here, right here, you'll see FI is going to be your inspired oxygen, and then this is going to be your expired oxygen. And so when you're ventilating a patient, does anyone remember what you want your, before you put them to sleep, what you want your end tidal oxygen to be when you're pre-oxygenating? You want that to be above 90 before you put them to sleep. Because that fills up your FRC.
Okay.
Fills up your FRC with pure oxygen.
Is that why they like typically just like pre-oxygenate everybody before?
Yeah, so they pre-oxygenate. It's also called denitrogenating
To get all the.
to get all of the nitrogen out of the FRC. It's like your oxygen reserve. It's like your tank before you put them to sleep. So yeah, the goal is to get it above 90, and you do have to hold a good seal on the patient to actually get it to work, to get them to breathe it in. What else? So usually after you intubated, you're going to put them down to flows of about 2. With sevoflurane, there's a theoretical risk of something called compound A that can cause renal toxicity. It's been in like animal studies, but it's not actually been clinically found to be an issue, but for the most part you want to use 2 liters of sevoflurane. And so that's what we typically do. These are the settings we usually would have. Oxygen flush, this is your flush valve. Does anyone remember what pressure this delivers oxygen at?
Kind of like uncontrolled pressure, it's like not really
That's
controlled.
where, so it's typically like
Up to 75 liters?
yeah, 35 to 75 liters at a PSI of about 50, so like a pipeline. But it can be more too. So,
Is that what you use to fill up your bags?
yes, but there's one important thing when you don't want to use this. Does anyone remember? You don't want to use your O2 flush during inspiration because your
just push all that extra pressure back in.
yeah, because your valves are closed on the machine. So if you're pushing that, you're giving it straight to the patient. Whereas during expiratory, your expiratory valve's open, so it's gonna vent some of that. But if you're giving this during inspiration, that valve's closed, so all of that pressure's going to the patient.
Trauma.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Have you ever had to use
O2 flush? Yeah, so if, I remember when I first started, I like never wanted to use it because I was terrified. But if you're, if you get disconnected from your ET tube, your bellows are going to drop because one of your functions of oxygen is filling the bellows, is driving your bellows. So then you reconnect them, and it's slowly going to rise unless you go like this and you just increase your flows to help fill it. or you hit this, and it will help fill it. I don't know that I could.
If I like could line it
I
up,
don't know
and
if I
I'm
could
trying to like line it up with this one.
demonstrate
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
try.
Oh, you can.
Oh, yeah, that song we just seen. With
Okay, so now our bellows are full.
It's the same order. They're gonna
Except
drop.
back then, you're like, call RT. Now you're
No, it's okay.
Is it still because the flow is so high?
Oh, could be, yeah.
So sometimes if it's not aligned just
But
right,
in
you'll do that
general,
too.
you would use that
So we have a
O2
leak.
flush if you're manually ventilating
So probably.
and you have a leak somewhere. So then you readjust your mask and you try to
Figure out the leak.
you readjust your mask, try to get a good seal on the patient. Use this to fill up. Use this to fill up your
You can just do that.
bag so that you can ventilate. And then this is going to be used to keep the pressure in your bag. So if you guys want to come and feel,
Yeah?
so right now you're going to ventilate. So keep going. And now you have a leak in your system.
10:47.
So you lose pressure. So yeah, this adjusts your pressure within your breathing circuit. Basically, that's what your APL does.